Hey guys, Montel here, and welcome to this edition of Free Thinking with Montel. My guest today received a life-changing diagnosis of progressive muscular dystrophy at the age of 34 and would eventually need a wheelchair. She didn't let that define her and leaned in hard to an adventurous life despite of her diagnosis. She's an engineer, assistive technology professor, an educator, an author, a parasurfer, and an award-winning photographer. She recently released her inspiring memoir, Rough Waters, which chronicles her slow decline in mobility and her determination to live an extraordinary life. The challenges she shares are both specific to her circumstances, yet relatable to all of us. Heather Markham, thank you so much for joining us today on Free Thinking with Montel.
Oh, Montel, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Absolutely, and we're honored to have you. Look, let's start from the beginning. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I am kind of from everywhere or nowhere, I guess you would say. My dad was military.
Okay, so you were a military brat, so you kind of bounced all over the place, huh?
Absolutely. So growing up in a nomadic military family, you learn a lot of skills.
Yeah,
You
for
learn
sure.
how to reinvent yourself. You learn how to become resilient.
Yep, you learn how to define yourself also, rather than let
Absolutely.
others define you, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And that was probably instilled in you long before. Tell me a little bit about what you did. Growing up, where'd you go to college? Where'd you study? Where'd you work at?
So I graduated from high school in Mesa, Arizona.
Hmm.
It was my second high school. I went off to college at Texas A&M University because I was raised in my early childhood at the Air Force Academy.
Gotcha.
And so when I got to Texas A&M, I was like, oh, guys in uniforms with short hair, this looks like home to me.
Sure.
And so I studied elementary education. And while I was at college, I went off to the Disney College program and was in custodial, which puts you out in front of a million people talking all the time.
Sure.
And it was great because my elementary education allowed me to know how to interface with everybody, right? And I injured my back while there. And so that kind of set off a whole cascade of things. I ended up bouncing around a lot and eventually went off and got a master's in computer science. Went to Edwards Air Force Base, worked in electronic warfare at
Wow.
Edwards Air Force Base. And that's when I became diagnosed with muscular dystrophy.
Well, let's talk about that for just a minute. Well, let's stop you right there because now, before you got diagnosed, were there symptoms that were going on? I mean, you did get diagnosed with it, and I don't know, so you correct me. But it seems like at age 34 you got diagnosed with it. But was this something that was there all along, and they finally figured it out because of symptoms, or what? How did it happen?
So my mom always said I was her clumsy child, tripping, falling down, breaking bones that didn't heal. I just didn't heal quickly. When I injured my back in 1990, I was 22 years old. And that's when the cascade of symptoms really started showing up. I had wasting away in my calf muscles. It became hard to run. It became hard to walk, stand up off of chairs. And doctors were like, oh, this is all in your head.
Right. And they probably were associating it a little bit with some of the symptoms that you had from your back injury, right?
Well, interestingly, they said, well, we know your back hurts and we understand that you have a back injury, but this calf muscle wasting and the other stuff just can't be related. And I had been followed by workers' comp doctors who were only interested in looking at my back injury. And so those 12 years are like, some of the doctors said, yes, we see there's something wrong, but it's not your back. And other doctors said, nope, you're just completely faking it.
And then when and how did they finally diagnose you?
In 2002, I was finally diagnosed when I went to an orthopedic surgeon, an orthopedic doctor, because I was having problems walking. And he said, well, I see that, but I don't think it's orthopedic. I really think it's neurological. And so a whole bunch of stuff happened, but eventually they ended up doing a muscle biopsy because I wasn't responding to medication. And so through a muscle biopsy, they said, "Oh, yeah, it's a muscular dystrophy."
Which I'm sorry, I still it throws me a little bit because again, you probably had it from 22 when you had that back injury, right? But it was not diagnosed, or
It's
did they?
genetic.
It's genetic, so you had it your whole life,
I had it my whole life.
and it was just waiting to manifest itself.
It was waiting to get bad enough for somebody to pay attention to it. The subtype I have, which wasn't discovered until 2006, so another 4 years after I was diagnosed, the subtype, the doctors are saying, is that my body doesn't make the protein that is the Band-Aid that heals a muscle when it tears.
Got it.
So I was a really active kid. I was a tennis player. I was championship ranked in the state of Texas. All of this. And so really, really active. And so I was tearing my muscles all the time.
Right.
And they just weren't healing. And so
And,
it wasn't until 34 that somebody said, "Oh my gosh, yeah, we can see the damage."
Gotcha. Because I got to tell you, I finally got diagnosed with MS, in the year 2000, and that I was well into 2000. I was well into my 40s, and what's so interesting is that I probably should have been diagnosed when I was in my 20s, early 20s, and can look back before that and find some instances where I could have probably gotten diagnosed when I was 16, 17. But back then, doctors had no idea, number one, that it was a disease that even affected people of color. And number two, it was so remote because I was literally like you, very active. I was a bodybuilder. I was working on weights and all this kind of stuff. So most of the times doctors would say that, if I stopped putting all that weight on my back, I wouldn't have these issues. So, it just kept being mischaracterized until I finally went in when having been through an episode or about, and they finally put it together and said, "My goodness, this has probably been there all along, and nobody noticed it."
Did you struggle with the invisibility of your disability in the early days?
Correct, and you struggle with that inside your head because when doctors try to say it's all in your head, or it's not what you think it is, or it's not something, you kind of start to question yourself, but that there's something wrong, and I'm sure that
Right.
you probably felt that same way, right?
Absolutely. I knew something was wrong. And I struggled exactly with, well, I know something's wrong. I feel something's wrong, but they're telling me that I'm crazy. I don't feel crazy. I feel like something's really wrong. And that struggle with an invisible disability, which, before you really know what's going on, right, that becomes problematic. And I think that people whose disabilities are more invisible struggle. They have a bigger challenge, right? It's really obvious when I roll in with my 400-pound wheelchair that something's going on.
Right.
But in the early days when I didn't always need a cane to walk, but yet I wanted an ADA hotel room,
Mm-hmm.
people would say, "Well, you look fine. What's wrong with you?
Right. As
Why
if
do
it's
you
their
need
business
this?"
anyway.
And
Yeah.
I would say, "I'm sorry, that's none of your business. I
Correct.
just need the
Correct.
room."
Absolutely. I also remember going through some of that also, where people say, "Well, what's wrong with you? That's none of your business." I remember going through TSA back in the day, even before 9/11, and I was on medication that required me carrying needles and other things with me. And, I had these non-doctor people who were TSA agents saying, "Well, why do you have so many needles? It's none of your business. I really, you have no right to ask me what's wrong with me." And, I got in arguments a couple of times with some TSA agents about, well, and because of medication I also had to carry, I had to keep keep it refrigerated. So sometimes when I travel, I would carry a thermos, put ice in it, put the medication in it, close it off. So when I get to TSA, they would open it up, and I would be like, you don't have to touch it. I'll touch my own medication. They go, "What's this for?" I would say, "It's none of your business. You don't really need to know. I'm sick. I'm on medication. There's a prescription. That's all you need to know." You know. And
Absolutely.
so for yourself, when you were first diagnosed, first off, tell me your own personal reaction to the diagnosis and how were you feeling then? Were you tripping around? Were you tripping a lot? Were you falling down? Were you on canes? Or did you need to have assistance when you walked? I mean, explain to me where you were when you got diagnosed.
Sure. So I used a cane for stability sometimes, but when I was officially diagnosed, I went home and cried for 2 days.
Hmm.
I had a very mixed reaction. I had the yes, hallelujah, somebody agrees that something's actually wrong with me. And then the oh my gosh, I'm 34 years old and I saw my entire future being ripped away from me. Could I keep my job? Could I do anything? Was I, what was I going to lose? Because I'd already lost tennis. I couldn't run anymore. I'd lost playing the violin because my hands are not strong enough
All
to
right.
grip. I'm like, what else am I going to lose? Am I ever going to get to fall in love? Am I going to get to keep driving? What kind of accommodations am I going to have to make at home? What kind of accommodations am I going to have to ask my employer for? Will they do it? All of these things start running through your head, after the initial relief of, oh my gosh,
At least I
I'm
know what it is.
at least it's got a name, right?
Right. Wow. And I understand the whole idea of going home and crying because I mean, that's the same way it faced me. I literally, the doctor who diagnosed me basically told me that, you're gonna have to stop your talk show. You have to stop working. I was like, dude, you didn't know me before I walked the door. What do you mean I got to stop working? I'm capable of being in here, so I'm going to work until my last minute. But you don't know me, and I really kind of got angry because I felt like you're acting like you got a crystal ball, and there's no such thing, right?
There's no such thing. I mean, there's so with the progression of technology, right? Things have become a lot easier, but I'm sure that you still struggle with the tiredness and
Absolutely.
other things. And I have no idea what you're going through. No,
Right.
that's I'm the first person to say I have no idea how your days go. You know, I just know how my days go.
Right, absolutely, and I have no idea how yours go because I don't I do understand the disease, muscular dystrophy, but I don't understand the disease because I only know from what I've been able to see before this. So, diagnosed at age 34, was your progression rapid first, or has it been a steady slope of decline? Or explain to me what's going on and what's gone wrong.
Well, it's strangely, I want to say almost, so it's a slow decline,
Mhm.
but as muscles tear, then fewer muscles are able to work. And so it looks more like an exponential decline.
And do any of the tears repair at all or no? So once you injure something, that's going to stay that way.
The doctors say, and I'm very careful to use that language, the doctors say that what's torn stays torn.
Wow. Okay. And from a prognosis standpoint, I mean, when you were diagnosed at age 34, did they give you a timeline? Did they say that this is going to eventually deteriorate to the point that you're going to have organ failure? Or I mean, how did they try to explain this to you?
They aren't very good at that.
Right.
The um, there there's a group called the Jane Foundation, Jain, and
Hmm.
they are researching limb girdle muscular dystrophy type R2 for the
Hmm.
second recessive type ever found. And so they said, "Hey, can we send your DNA off to France to get analyzed?" And I was like, "Ooh, France. Okay,
Can I go with
sure.
it? No, sorry. Yeah.
Why not?"
Right.
And the lab in France came back and they said, "There's this weird glitch. We'd like to have more samples." I'm like, "Okay, do you want to do a direct draw?" Because I had just sent them blood. Like, I will go to France, like if that's what you need.
Sure.
I couldn't get anybody to buy into that, but it was worth a shot.
Sure.
Um, and the geneticists came back with was they said, "You have 3 flips in your genetic sequence, and we're only expecting 2. And of the 3 that we're seeing, only one of them is the one that we expect."
Wow.
And so I talked to the researcher at the Jane Foundation and I said, "What does this mean?" And she said, I don't know how to break this to you. I'm like, "Oh man, this sounds really bad. What is going on?" And she said, "We think that your type of limb girdle muscular dystrophy might be secondary to something else that's going on that we don't know how to look for or diagnose or tell you." And I went, "Oh, so like it could be something else and this is just, the second thing?" And she's like, "Yes." And I was like, "Okay." So the
Wow.
doctors really have no idea. So
And have they figured it out since or no?
no, they've not figured it out since.
But they still think there's something else going on.
They still think that there's something else going on.
Wow. And forgive me, I just have to. How old are you now?
I'm 50. I just turned 56.
Okay, so 20 years past that diagnosis, did they expect you to be able to reach 56?
They My type of muscular dystrophy, my subtype doesn't impact my life expectancy.
Okay.
It mostly impacts the shoulder muscles,
Okay.
and my hip muscles,
Okay.
and a little bit of my abdominal strength. So, like, marching in place is tough because I'm the muscle that allows me to draw my knee up
Right.
is very weak.
Okay.
There's a second type that is also called Miyoshi distal myopathy, which
Mhm.
interestingly was found in Japan the year I was born. So I find that as an interesting connection. And it takes out your hands and your feet. And when I say takes out, I say means very, very weak.
Got
So I know this is on video and I don't tend to do this demonstration a lot, but I'm going to show you what it looks like to touch my nose.
Okay.
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 So my shoulders don't allow me to actually directly touch my nose.
Got
So,
it.
so to do that, I'm going to lean way over here out of camera and touch my
Wow.
nose because I
Got
have
it.
to have one hand support the other in
Sure.
order to do that.
Do you have
Um,
do you have flexation in your biceps and your triceps, or it's mostly your shoulders?
so everything's gotten weaker. Everything that's ever been torn has gotten weaker.
Got it.
My triceps are stronger than my biceps, so I can push better than I can pull.
Got it.
Um, and I lean a lot when I eat, and so I don't drink soup anymore unless it's out of a mug. There are just things that every day some adjustment needs to happen. And they don't have a good prognosis. I took my fiance to my last medical exam and I said, "You need to be able to ask the doctor anything you want to because you deserve to know."
Sure.
And um, I would have taken him before we got engaged if there had been a medical option so that, you know, he could make that decision. Now he's a stand up guy who's I've known since high school. And that's a whole other story. But
Sure.
he, the doctor said, you're going to need more tech. You're going to need more technology. You're going to need more round the clock help. I'm alone today. So
Mhm.
the things that are glitchy and off in my world, I just have to figure out on my own.
Gotcha.
I have a personal care attendant who comes in 4 evenings a week, and she comes in and helps me with bathing and hygiene and does the cleaning and changes the bed and does the cooking and the laundry and she does all that stuff.
Got
And
it.
so I said to my fiance, even when I get to the point of having a weak diaphragm where it's more difficult to speak, if I need a speech generating device, we'll go that direction. But the doctors are never talking about a ventilator. They're not
Got
talking about it reducing my lifespan. They're just saying, you're going to need more help. You're going to need more people help.
it.
It's going to be more difficult.
And for yourself, I mean, do you notice like tomorrow or today? Do you notice what's different than yesterday, or is it like a couple weeks go by and you go, "Wait a minute, I just lost that ability a couple weeks ago," or how is it?
Um, some days are a little more difficult. I can kind of tell that things are harder than they were yesterday.
Got it.
Um, a lot of that depends on if I remembered to eat breakfast. Did I
Hmm.
fuel my body? And if I
Got
didn't fuel my body, then how could I expect it to be stronger that day? Um,
right.
a lot of times what happens is I don't try something for a long time. And then when I go back and do it again and it doesn't work the same or as well, then I have that instantaneous sense of loss again.
Got it. Got it. Well, I have this mantra that I've lived by. I alone own the definition of who I am. And it sounds like you have a pretty similar view to life, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, even though we'd love to hear the prognosis that the doctors have, it's almost better to understand that we alone will figure out what that definition will be of how we're going to deal with our illness,
Yes, and to the point where I don't want them to tell me what they think,
right?
right? Like
Because you
I
will live down to their expectations if they give you the wrong information.
You will absolutely live down to those expectations, and what a great way to put that. I've not heard it said like that before, but yes. I asked my doctor if I was gonna get locked in,
Hmm.
and, and he said, "We don't ever expect that for you." He said, "But even, there's so much technology help that you can have a great quality of life." And my doctor was wonderful. He didn't say, "Oh, your quality of life is gonna be really terrible when you need all these things." He said, it doesn't matter what technology you have. Like you can have a great quality of life if you choose. And those were the key words. If you choose to have a great quality of life.
And that's really what it's all about. Is I mean, I look at myself and think, sometimes, oh, woe is me, but at the same time, I can live the best life I can have with MS rather than complain about the fact that I have it. I've often said, I have MS, but MS will never have me because I truly will do whatever I can to the fullest in spite of MS and without even thinking about MS.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I have a really hard time using the labels that society wants us to use, right?
Hmm.
I was just talking with my fiance about this and I said, I have friends who use wheelchairs and their significant others walk. He said, and they're really big in labeling themselves as an interabled couple. I'm like,
Right.
can we just not do that? Can I just not use that label? He's like, we're a couple. There's no
Correct.
reason to label it. And I'm like, thank you, because that just feels really odd. And the
Right.
whole idea of disabled and differently abled. And one of my friends was like, well, you're just differently abled. I said, can I ask you a question? And she said, sure. I said, do you play tennis? And she said, yeah, I dink around on the court. I said, do you play tennis as well as Serena Williams? And she said, no. I said, then are you differently abled than Serena Williams? And she said, yes. I said, great, then stop labeling me because we're all differently abled.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then with those differences, there's unforeseen circumstances, but those unforeseen circumstances can also be unforeseen opportunities.
100% opportunities. I
Absolutely.
wouldn't I wouldn't have earned a tiara for running my mouth if I didn't have a wheelchair. I wouldn't have been Miss Wheelchair Kentucky. I wouldn't have gotten into the finals at Miss Wheelchair America. So I've always wanted a sparkly tiara and I earned one.
Wow, there you go. And when did you start? When did you decide to start parasurfing? Come on now.
Um, interestingly, I was looking for something to do with a wheelchair because I knew a wheelchair was coming when I was leaving Edwards Air Force Base and going to grad school at Pitt. And my dad's like, really? You're going to where it snows and you're about to get a wheelchair? And I said, hey, Dad, follow the money because that Pitt was doing all of the research in rehabilitation science and technology. And I knew I was getting a chair up there because I knew I wouldn't be able to walk in Pittsburgh. I had it's called a rollator. It's like a walker with wheels. I
Right.
got there for stability and struggled getting up and down a driveway. And so I knew a wheelchair was in my future. And so I went looking for things to do. And I was like, okay, well, there's wheelchair tennis. And then I
Mhm.
stumbled across a video of Miss Wheelchair California going out surfing with this group called Life Rolls On. And I was like, okay, well, there are two things that I'm interested in. You
Hmm.
know, what is it to be a Miss Wheelchair state title holder and surfing? Um,
Right.
I'm all about roller coasters and the front seat of the roller coaster, man. That's my favorite place to
Only
be.
place to be. Yeah.
Only place to be, right? And so I was like, okay, well, I'd grown up in my childhood. I'd been to the beach at my grandparents' house out in Cape Cod, and I love the water and I love the freedom of the water. And so when I found out that there was this group who would take people out surfing, I was like, yeah, count me in, man. And I've
Gotcha.
caught some really big waves. And I've, gone face first off a surfboard at high speed.
Right.
And, you get banged up but the floating and the freedom,
Sure.
it helps me forget that I have this disease, which is so crippling to me on land,
Hmm.
but in the water, it's all freedom.
As you and I are kind of kindred souls in that way because I snowboard, and I still do have the ability to do a lot of things on land, but I snowboard. But that's the only time that I really, honestly, if I do a whole day of snowboarding, I don't think about MS once the entire day because I do it well, and there's a freedom to just gliding across that snow and being in a almost like on a magic carpet, being able to glide across and do my thing and actually be able to do it as well as other people who are, like you said, termed differently abled, but those other people who are just have no issues. There's something behind that a couple of days of snowboarding changes my entire demeanor in life because I for that period of time can actually sit back and say, doesn't matter what you call me, I'm still able to do anything else that other people can do. So, that's been a really good boon for me. You know, you have been talking to not just yourself. Well, first off, let's talk about why you decided to write your book.
I decided to write my book for three separate groups of people.
Hmm.
When I was first diagnosed, couldn't find any information about what it might look like, what it might feel like to live with this. And I was looking for hope. And so I wrote my book for people who are newly diagnosed or somewhere in the progression to, offer hope to them to say, look, you can still have a really full life.
Correct.
And I wrote it for their friends and family so that those people would have an understanding about what it was to feel with this disease, what it feels like to live with this disease progression, and wanted them to have a little bit more understanding.
Absolutely. And, it's so good that you said you wrote it for their friends and family because just the other night I was at an event and a gentleman walked up to me and said, my wife was just diagnosed with MS and, she's having a hard time and I don't know what to say to her. And I said, well, the first thing you need to do is understand that you are as impactful on her life as much, you will have as much impact on her life as any medication or anything else she does. So she needs you to be in her corner to make sure she understands that you don't see her any differently so she got diagnosed yesterday, but she's the same person she was 3 months ago, and she was probably the same person 6 months ago. So you need to be as supportive of her now as you were then, and more supportive of her going forward. And sometimes I don't think family members of those who suffer or those who have these kinds of diagnoses recognize how important they are to the lives of the people who are dealing with it.
Right. They make all the difference. They are the close in team.
Yep.
The third group that I actually wrote it for was occupational therapists and physical therapists and physicians and kids in med school. I call them kids because, when you're 56, everybody in their 20s looks like a kid. And
Absolutely.
to have more compassion and to not do these big sweeping pronouncements, to have a little bit more understanding about how their words land and how they can really make a difference in offering hope and not saying, oh, well, you're going to be in a wheelchair and good luck to you.
Right. And so often these people who are therapists see so many clients that they start to stop remembering that every single one of them is an individual. They get caught up in, you know, their mantras for all rather than their mantra for one. I've often found that to be the case, especially with some therapists who, just because a person walked in yesterday who couldn't do both the elliptical and a treadmill, well, then the person who walks in today who can, you should make sure that you afford them the opportunity to do both if they have the ability to do both, and applaud them for their ability. Not that you're saying it's better than the person that was here yesterday, but I'm glad that you're trying to continue to do the best you can do, to be the best person you can be.
Right. The other side of that is I had hurt my knee. And when I
Mhm.
went to therapy, they're like, okay, you need to do these exercises in 3 sets of 10. I
Right.
said, that's going to wear me out. And she said, no, you just push through. And so I did them. And the next day I fell down.
Wow.
And when I went back to therapy the day after that, I said, great, I did all your exercises and I wasn't listening to my body. I was listening to you
Right.
and your professional opinion of what I should be doing. But you didn't take into consideration what I said to you.
Right.
And I fell down. When I got diagnosed, I was falling a lot and
Mhm.
tripping over my own feet a lot.
Right.
Um, I don't think there's a story in the book, but I was using my cane and in a home improvement store and carrying a gallon of paint. All of those things together should not be problematic, except that when I turned, I caught the toe of my shoe and I went down and I landed on that can of paint.
Ouch.
Broke my ribs.
Ouch.
Oh, it was bad and messy and awful, right? Um, and the therapists were, so you just have to listen to your body.
Correct.
And if my body says today, yep, you can do these things, great. Do them slowly, do them carefully, do them considered. And then also, I'm listening to my body about how much rest it needs now,
Right.
how much unfolding. I spend a half an hour in bed after I wake up, which in some people's world would make me lazy, except that when I do that, I flatten out my adjustable bed and allow my body to unfold
Right.
for that half an hour so that I can get a long, slow stretch.
Right.
And
Yeah. It's the same. I kind of do the same thing intuitively for myself. Like I try to exercise every day. But then like last week, I was on the road for a week straight. I was on the road from Sunday to Sunday. I was in two different cities. I was in Boston, flew into New York, had to work in New York. I did some things outside the city on Friday, then back into the city, and I had an event Saturday night. And then Sunday, I and my wife flew back here. And, I kicked myself a little bit because I said, I got to go to the gym. But no, I had to listen to myself and understand I was too tired. I got off that plane, got here to the apartment. I was like, I'm not doing it today. I'll do it tomorrow. And then ended up the tomorrow, which was yesterday. I literally was still exhausted from the travel, and I have to stop. I'm 67 years old, and I have to remember that some of this has to do with just my regular age, not MS. But I can't go the way I did in my 20s, nor should I try to go the way I did in my 20s. But of course, I try to, and it catches me. But on those occasions that it happens, like I've been in the gym yet today. When we get done, I will work out and exercise and get myself, started again for the next week. I don't hit myself over the head or beat myself up because I didn't go yesterday. No, that was yesterday. Yesterday's behind me. I can't do anything about yesterday now. It's already done. So now I can only do things about today moving forward. And I will go to the gym tonight and I will get back on track. But, I think you've nailed it when you talk about all of us who have any kind of difference in, you know, our diagnoses or who we are with the illnesses that we have to stop. You are the only person who knows what's going on inside of you. No one else can answer that question. And if you feel like, there are those days that, I better take a little bit of a break because I need it. And I, like you, I also wake up in the morning and I don't like to get up and jump out of bed. I want to take my time to get my thoughts around me and make sure everything's moving okay. And I stretch my legs, and then I finally will get up, and then it's okay.
there's the I want to say what's lovely about what you just said is that your working out helps your body be resilient.
Yes.
and your discipline, to listen to yourself to not work out, you have the discipline of working out. And so, amen to yesterday's behind me. I can't fix that.
Right. I wish I could. I mean, if the second somebody figures that out, they're going to be trillionaires because you can't go back go back to yesterday. You change yesterday, you change today, but nobody's figured that out yet, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime in my reality. So you can only really change the things that are in front of you right this second, and make sure you take advantage of every second that moves forward from that point on. That's really all we can ever do. Tell me a little bit about this theory this thought that you had that sometimes people who have disabilities often are seen, or in some ways they feel themselves to be an inconvenience.
It's really challenging. I still struggle with that, because I want to help in the kitchen.
Right.
Okay? My fiance is cooking, and I'm like, let me help. Well, that means him stopping what he's doing to get the lap board to put it in my lap, and to get a cutting board that will fit there, and to hand me a knife that he's very careful to hand me a knife that I can use.
Right.
Right. And it's going to take me the better part of like 3 minutes to, slice up one zucchini.
Right.
Okay, well, that's going to slow dinner down, and that's just inconvenient.
Right.
If we're hungry and we want to eat now, my helping can be inconvenient.
Right.
And I need help getting dressed, And I said to him once, isn't this does this bother you? And he said, I get to spend more time with you. How is that bad?
Absolutely. And especially he's your fiance. He loves you. So therefore, those things are things that they live for and get joy out of, knowing that there's joy in making you, when you say you need help getting dressed. Well, when you put that dress on, you put those clothing on, that when you roll by that mirror, you take a look. Let's get this clear. You want to look as good as you can in that wheelchair, right?
Absolutely. I do want to look as good as I can sitting on my wheelchair.
Absolutely. And he knows he helps you do that. So that also impacts how you feel during the day, how you're going to react to other people, because you look good.
Right. I know I look good. The challenge is that not everyone that we interact with feels that way.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Some people who and the people who have treated me and have said to me, your disease is inconvenient to me, I have walked those people out of my close circle.
Absolutely.
You just say, look, I'm sorry that you feel that way. So let's just distance ourselves.
Correct.
That'll work out better for everybody.
Absolutely. Because I don't need you in my life. I'm not an inconvenience to myself. And if I'm not an inconvenience to myself, how can I be one to you? How dare you even think that way? Right. Well, tell me a little about your work as an ADA architectural barrier specialist.
Right. So I'm a certified accessibility inspector and plans examiner through the International Code Council. And I've been studying ADA accessibility since 2008. And as a wheelchair user, the architectural barriers are really the things that, I notice. Right. So I'm aware of when the signs don't have Braille, but I'm kind of aware of, I'm more aware now of contrast on signs and those kind of things for low vision, but I'm exceedingly aware of architectural barriers.
Right.
And I'm very aware of hotel rooms and, what on earth is going on? How did I end up booking an accessible room, a mobility room, hotel room? And when I roll in, there's a throw rug on the floor.
Right.
Why is there a throw rug on the floor in an ADA mobility room? And why is the sliding glass door to the balcony, because you told me I had a balcony room. Awesome. Great. Thank you. Why is that door 28 inches wide?
Right.
I can't get my wheelchair through a door that's 28 inches wide when code is 32.
Right.
And so And just really obnoxious things like that. I was in a hotel in Arkansas, and they had like a half privacy wall next to the toilet. Okay, which is great and lovely, except that it blocked my access,
Right.
and I couldn't get onto the toilet in this hotel room, which was labeled ADA mobility accessible. And I know that that's super private to say such things, but welcome to my world.
Right. No. No. I mean, does it? But and I'm sure that you talk about some of the barriers that you've faced traveling. I mean, are businesses like industries like the airlines, are they starting to pay more attention? I happen I mean, let me tell you, very very interesting. Um, not only did I have MS, but 5 years ago I suffered a hemorrhagic stroke, and for a little while I had a walker, and I you know I, I was using the walker because it was just primary, just making sure I stayed stable. But I also noticed when I tried to walk down the ramp to get to an airplane, and then at that moment in time I got to put my walker aside, and I can't even get down the aisle of a plane without walker. So it's
Mhm.
like, are they trying to say that I don't care if you make it down a plane, all right, or you have to hold on to everybody's seat as you go by? Um, that hit me hard. Now, fortunately, I got beyond my walker for me. However, I go to the airport now, and I often see people with walkers, and I think to myself, my goodness, the hard time they're going to have getting to their seat.
Right. Airlines are starting to pay more attention. There's been a lot of work done. The Paralyzed Veterans of America, there's been a huge, and they're just the name that comes to mind. But there's a lot of work being done with the airlines, and there's a lot of work, a lot of discussion about actually being able to put a wheelchair like mine and tie it down on an airplane. Now, Montel, I have to tell you that for a long time I've said, you know, I don't see that happening because the number of seats that you're going to have to take out to accommodate my power wheelchair so that I can tilt and recline and I can be comfortable and
Right,
not end up with a pressure sore, that's a lot of space. And airlines are all about money,
right,
but there's been a lot of pressure. And so they're starting to make a lot of changes. The hotel industry, on the other hand, is still um, not following the laws which are already in place. I mean,
right,
there are laws that say that you have to make your website not only accessible, I ought to be able to book a room on your hotel website directly, just like you could.
right.
Um, and there should be a drawing of what that room looks like. So I can tell things like where's the grab bar and all that kind of stuff. But there's no enforcement.
Right.
And that's hugely problematic.
And is it an industry that you sense that they're trying to listen, or is it just they don't give a damn?
I'm going to go with the second.
Gotcha. And I said it, you didn't, but I mean, I'm telling you, I really feel like that's real. Sometimes their attitude, they could care less whether or not they get our business, and our business is as important as anybody else's.
1 in 8 people in the US has a mobility disability. 1 in 8. That's
Right.
huge. And the industry and the businesses that don't have accessible bathrooms, the restaurants that don't have accessible bathrooms, um, the hotels, say the airlines are getting a little bit better, but the airlines are still breaking 26 wheelchairs a day.
Wow,
26.
that's insane.
So if 26 people who walked a day got to their destinations with legs broken that required hospitalization, there would be a huge uproar. But there's not that uproar for people who are losing their mobility because the airlines are breaking chairs. Um, and I kind of lost my train of thought about where I was going. But there's not the enforcement. I really want hotels to want to do better. I don't know how to do that except to explain to them that they're missing money, right? They're leaving money on the floor because they're not welcoming. They're not making their spaces welcoming. They're not making their spaces useful. They're not making their accommodations accessible
to everyone. I mean, you got to keep them on blast with this. Do not give up. Keep, squeaky wheels get the grease. So keep squeaking as hard as you can, because I think this is something that needs to be heard and said. And, it doesn't just affect you. It affects your husband or your future husband. It affects, family members and others. So, definitely do not stop squeaking.
Thank you. And there are people who think they're making good choices that are just making bad choices. I was in a restaurant in Dallas, and it was kind of set up with a little bit of a corner, kind of in a corner, and not in a traditional way. And they had put the sink behind the door, because that's how when you went straight in, there was a wall there. So you had to make a hard right 90-degree turn. And they had put a sink there. Well, people who were at the sink kept getting whacked by the door.
Right.
Got the setup. So what they did is they put a doorstop in to keep the people at the sink from getting hit. What that did is that reduced the swing of the door, and then I couldn't get my wheelchair in.
That's crazy.
And I was like, okay, you thought you were making a good decision. And I sent my fiance in to go look at the accessible stall, and he's like, wow, this is really great. This is huge, and it's set up really well. And I said, isn't it a shame I can't get there?
Right. You can't even get in the door.
I can't even get in the door. And I gave the restaurateur that I spoke to, who was clearly not in a position of power.
Right.
He was just whoever was the manager of the moment. I gave him my contact information, and I said, I would love to help you. Here's my contact information. Nothing.
Wow.
But my company is called Making Waves for Good. And I'm going to work in the ADA accessibility and usability space, helping businesses, get beyond compliant.
Well, I mean, you nailed it. When for them, they won't be compliant until they recognize how much money they lose. And as they continue to lose money, then it hits their bottom line. They will figure out a way to fix that.
Right.
Now, you're an award-winning photographer also, right?
I am. I have I've had pictures in Budapest and Barcelona. I had a photo that was in a finalist for Bird Photographer of the Year.
Wow.
I don't know if you can see the black and white, the wheelchairs right over my head. It's wheelchair rugby.
I see that. I can see the wheelchairs, the bottom of one of the pictures over your head. Yes.
Yep. And that won a third place in Spain.
Wow. Congratulations. Where can people go if they wanted to see some of your work? Do you have a website that's got a lot of them on there?
So my photography website is called justforthelove.com. My book is at heathercmarkham.com. And everything is tied together at makingwavesforgood.com. I'm hoping to get my message out. And so, if someone wants to talk about what I really believe is that you decide who you are before anybody else does. I'm with you, Montel.
Right.
We decide, right? We decide who we are before anybody else does. Every single moment of every single day.
You alone own the definition of who you are. There's no
absolutely.
Correct. Well, anything else you want to
add? No, I don't think so. Well, yeah, I do. Can we go ride roller coasters together?
Well, let me just tell you a little something about that. Just I want you to put this in the back of your head and do a little Google on this. There has been some research about roller coasters and the fact that they could be causing little mini strokes inside your brain because your head is snapped around so much. I would venture to say, not because of muscular dystrophy. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but I would really, really be very cautious because, if you're a person who has if your illness can be exacerbated by muscle tears, just the mobility, just the idea of staying stable in that thing that's shaking your body. Now, I used to be a roller coaster freak. When I say freak, I've flown all over this country and ridden probably at least 17 of the top 20 roller coasters in the country. A few of them I used to ride over and over again. As a matter of fact, I rode the Beast in Cincinnati, Ohio, 14 times in a row. That's one of the longest wooden roller coasters in the country that has a vertical loop. It's a wooden roller coaster with a vertical loop. And I did that because I was like really into that. But then I started to realize after I had my stroke, I did some research about it because, you can be, depending on your neck strength, again, as you're whipping around, your head is banging back and forth inside of that device. You are having little teeny mini concussions. For some of us, it may not make a difference. For some of us who will have a little bit of an issue, you better pay very close attention to that. So now I should say, I would love to take you up on that invitation, but I've stopped riding them since my stroke.
Okay.
Be careful. Do the research yourself. You may still think no, that doesn't happen because they've not definitively been able. There hasn't been a study of taking people off of a roller coaster and putting them immediately in a CAT scan or an MRI to take a look at what's going on in their brain. But you just might want to just put up a little flag and say, interesting. Though we love that energy. Now, I don't think the same thing happens in those drop kinds of rides. I love those too. But it's the roller coasters with the whipping turns and you're pulling G's. Be a little bit cautious, okay?
Okay, I appreciate that. Maybe I'll just stick to surfing.
Yeah, stick to surfing. You probably have less an opportunity to be snapped around as much as you are in a coaster, okay?
Okay, thank you so much for this time. It's been great.
Oh, Heather, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much for, giving information out there that people can use. I mean, we all need, you see people in wheelchairs all the time. Some people ignore them. I don't. I try my best to say hello to a person who's rolling, who's cruising, no matter where they are, whether it be at the airport or other places, just to be able to say, because I don't want you to feel like you're invisible. Because some people don't want to look because they think that maybe if I'm looking that the person might be offended. No, I think that most people in wheelchairs want to be acknowledged as being there, being present. So that's what I try to do. And I think you've helped people understand that that's exactly how you feel too. I mean, you want to be present, you want to be acknowledged, and you have rightfully should be.
Well, we're all just people, right?
Correct.
Let's talk.
All just people, and let's have those conversations. So if ever any time down the road you want to come back, make sure you let us know. We'd love to have you back on. There's so much more I know that you have to talk about. I mean, I didn't even touch on your engineering and some of the other things that you're so involved in, and we should have a conversation about that at a later date.
I'd love to. My fiance and I are writing our story. We
Oh,
were high school sweethearts and reconnected in January after being apart for more than 35 years and having completely separate lives.
wow,
So
that's incredible. That's the story. Well, when you write that story and come on back and share it with me, okay?
I'll do that and we'll come back. Thank you.
Absolutely, Heather. You be well. Take care of yourself, and you make sure you keep tuning in to Free Thinking with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please send us your comments.